And more continuing coverage of Super Bowl 59 here from Radio Row at the New Orleans Convention Center continues here with Front Office Sports and Baker Machado alongside our editor-in-chief, Dan Roberts. And very excited to have somebody who's really innovating in the sports space right now, the commissioner of the National Women's Soccer League, Jessica Berman, joining us here over at Radio Row. Jessica, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So first off, we got to start with my hometown of Denver, Colorado.
Wow. I wasn't prepped on that.
I know. I was going to throw something right at
How psyched are you?
My family, my sister who played Division I soccer is incredibly excited about this new franchise.
I'm going to not continue this interview unless you made your season ticket.
Yes. I will text my mother the moment this is over to make sure she's gotten her deposit. I know people in the community there are incredibly excited, but from a league standpoint, I know how exciting this is, adding this new team. What did Denver sort of bring to the market for you guys that you wanted to add them as the next team?
I think there were really three things. First and foremost, the collective investment they're making, as you may have read and heard, is the largest investment in women's sports in the history of the world, period.
The expansion fee.
Not just that, all of their commitments around building infrastructure for their training facility, and they're going to build a purpose-built stadium in Denver.
Yep.
And that is going to be transformative, not just for our league, but to set the tone for what's to come in all of women's sports. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that, well, you know, Denver is an incredible market. That market was built for women's soccer.
Yep.
We see the U.S. women's national team sell out in 24 hours every time they go there. And the community is built for this.
We don't even have a women's sports team there.
It's
so
actually,
you now have the market covered.
It's one of those things where it's shocking to imagine, and it will feel this way in 2026. How is this the first time professional women's sports has come to Denver? And then the third thing is, when you look at a map, and obviously we're still expanding, we're still growing, there's a gap in the middle of the country. And we really need to be strategic as we think about media and discoverability of our game. Having teams across our very large geographic footprint is a strategic priority for us. Obviously, they're not Eastern time, they're not Pacific time. It allows for us to be more intentional about the distribution of our games across all of our media partners. And those are really the three reasons that differentiated them. But I will say, it was the hardest decision we probably had to make.
It was between Denver and Ohio, wasn't it?
It was Cleveland, Cincinnati, Denver. Any of those teams could have and would have been successful. So it was a good problem to have for us, but hard to say no to those groups and those cities. And hopefully there'll be opportunities to explore it in the future.
Jessica, you mentioned the financial commitment that the new Denver expansion team has made also to the area and to the facilities. There is a facility and stadium arms race happening right now in women's sports. I mean, also over in the WNBA, we've covered this. How can you make sure that all of the NWSL teams kind of keep up to date with this? Because right now it's not just the stadium you have and expanding to accommodate these new audiences, these new in-person audiences for women's sports. It's also the practice facility. It's making sure that the players are sort of completely catered to. You look at Unrivaled, which just launched, and all of the different bells and whistles that they had for their players, including the moms.
Yeah, it's true. First of all, the easiest way to solve this is through expansion. And so our last 4 expansion teams that came into this league, it was contractually required for them to build a purpose-built training facility. So as you expand, if you are a high-growth league, that's the quickest way to solve it. I also believe that sports owners are inherently competitive. There's a reason they like investing in sports. And so they want to keep up. And the changes we made in our CBA, which probably were some of the most innovative things that any sports league have ever done, to grant full free agency to all players when they're not under contract, really forces incentive alignment around investing in infrastructure, because our teams have to compete to attract players. No talent is going to land on their lap. They're going to have to really invest in the professional training environment to attract the top players in the world. And because of that, we actually have 4 incumbent teams who are not expansion teams that have announced recently that they are building purpose-built training facilities. The most recent one that just opened is Angel City. And if you saw the faces of those players as they walked through the halls, Sid LaRue, Kristen Press, Alyssa Thompson, just dying at the idea that they have their own space dedicated to them, branded with the right amount of investment. It's going to change the game, not just perceptionally, but actually the players are going to be able to be trained appropriately to be professional athletes.
Well, and I was just going to say, you mentioned attracting top talent. I mean, another big story has been players maybe getting wooed by teams like Chelsea. You know, some of these U.S. players going over to Europe, which of course women's soccer, they're also getting big. How do you make sure that you guys are retaining players for the NWSL and keeping that pipeline coming toward the NWSL?
It's very easy to get distracted by the specific micro examples of players who left. And of course, we want to keep all the best players here in the NWSL. It is also true that in this transfer window, we gained more players than we lost. So the number of players who transferred into our league was higher than the number of players who are left. And we are monitoring this with data and analysis about the skill level, the quality of the players. And we're going to have to look at this on a multi-year basis because the ins and outs in any given transfer window are going to be hard to assess in the moment. And so since our vision is to be the best league in the world, this is a super high priority to make sure that on balance, we're bringing in more top talent than we're losing. And we also just have to recognize, just to keep ourselves accountable to the truth, that this is a global game. It's unlike the NFL, it's unlike the NBA, it's unlike other leagues where there is only one league that you can play for. I would argue that there is no league that competes with us, but there are super clubs that compete with the NWSL. Now that's apples and oranges, right? So you got to look at it from the perspective of some of these super clubs are going to be able to attract and woo players to come there. And it's our hope that on balance, players want to come to the NWSL because they believe in the things that we stand for and the things that we are doing.
Let's talk scheduling. I know it has been challenging, to say the least, putting schedules together, mainly because you're dealing with a lot of teams who don't have the infrastructure in place. You're utilizing stadiums with MLS teams, other sports teams, all this other stuff. Is scheduling getting easier now for you guys in the upcoming seasons ahead, mainly because you're having more of these clubs with their own facilities now?
Before I answer your question, I just want to say that this is not new to the NWSL, and this is not only in women's sports. So if you look at MLS in early days, they played all their games in NFL buildings. If you look at the NHL and the NBA, they share buildings. This is an infrastructure challenge that exists in professional sports generally. As it relates to the making of our schedule, it's actually gotten harder because we have real media partners who have specific windows that we need to live within, and we have specific deliverables that we need to meet in terms of viewership goals and other investment that our partners have made in us. We've gotten better at it despite it becoming harder because we have the resources internally at the league to be better prepared and to be more intentional and strategic with how we make our schedule. So despite it being harder, we feel like we're in a better place this year. We think the 2025 schedule is the best it's ever been. And honestly, counting down the days until our season kicks off in March.
I was going to ask you, if we zoom out a little bit, Jessica, obviously the rise of women's sports. And as you said, it's not new, and yet we know that in the last year, 2 years, new eyeballs and more people kind of snapping to attention than ever before, right? And the NWSL is a huge part of that. It's the WNBA, it's the PWHL. There's so many examples, and we covered all very closely at FOS. I do want to ask you if you feel like now there's more pressure than ever before. You know, so much was made about WNBA ratings and the Caitlin Clark effect that I almost worry that next season, as soon as those ratings dip, you're going to have all those critics again. They're going to say, see, it was a one-off, or it was a temporary thing. Do you think about that? Try not to worry about that? And does it apply kind of across the board?
Both and. I think about that and I try not to worry about that. I think that's part of what you would expect where there's a challenger property and people are asking themselves, is this built to last? Is this a moment or a movement? The number of times I've been asked that question, like I can't even count on 10 hands. As we think about the future, I think we have to look at it holistically over multiple years because there's going to be episodic growth and strong growth years and moderate growth years. I don't have any concerns substantively about the long-term trajectory of definitely the NWSL, but also women's sports. We have demonstrated that despite there being many examples of this in the course of history, certainly in women's soccer where this should have been done in the 1990s, this time is different. This time is different because of the investment. The game itself hasn't changed, especially for women's soccer, where if you close your eyes as an American and think of greatness, you actually think of women. That is very unique. The game's always been amazing. What's different is the investment. And once the investment comes and you have real business people who have skin in the game and incentive alignment around growth, it will grow.
We've seen team valuations, WNBA and even in NWSL, grow exponentially over the last couple of years as well. You see the Igers with their historic, purchase with Angel FC. Even expansion fee for Denver, $110 million for expansion fee. Just 16 months before that, Boston, the expansion fee was $53 million. Does that sort of show you the sound business model in terms of the valuations, in terms of the growth for this, that you essentially could have, as you said before, 30 teams down the road?
There is no reason that this asset couldn't be as valuable as an NFL team. There is no reason. This business, mic drop.
Yeah,
I don't want to drop your mic
that.
and break it.
No, but I love
it's
that.
True. This business and this asset class outperforms every other asset class. And women's sports has been an underinvested asset class. So smart business people, not surprisingly, like Bob Iger, like Alan Waxman at 6th Street, like Rob Cohen in Denver.
And Melody Hobson
like
also.
Melody Hobson in Denver. World-renowned, respected business people see it, want to invest in it because even at $110 million, they see it as an undervalued asset class. That's what Melody Hobson said at our press conference, and I told her I'm going to take her on the road with me because
she's great at
better when she says it than I say it, and it's true.
It's funny that you say, there's no reason it can't be as valuable as an NFL team. We haven't talked much about the NFL. We're here at the Super Bowl.
I love that it took us this long to talk about the NFL.
What do you take, as kind of a page from their book, whether it's Goodell and how he runs that league, or whether it's everything the NFL has done? I mean, this Radio Row all around us, it's just kind of insane, right? I mean, is this what the NWSL could look like in 10 to 15 years?
Well, funny you say that because I'm here with my head of comms and we're like, how many years is it going to take us to have a convention center like this?
Well, I was going to say like 30 years. I didn't want to.
Definitely not 30
10
years.
to 15.
I think 5 to 10.
Yeah,
I would say 5 to 10. And already year over year, with the championships that we've had in Washington, my first season, in San Diego, my second season, in Kansas City, every single year, the number of media who's there, the number of influencers who are there. CBS Mornings literally relocated their set to Kansas City for the week to promote our championship. The only other sport they've done that for is the NFL. So we're well on our way. And I think when you look at where we are on a relative basis, you have to look no further at the commonalities that exist between us and the NFL. So 4 of our owners are NFL owners and are here right now, today. The number of sponsors of the NFL who are invested in the NWSL, the number of media partners who are invested in the NFL and the NWSL, that through line should tell you where we're heading.
All of this is so exciting, especially for those of us who care deeply about women's sports, women's soccer, and great business models. We're excited to see where you guys are going with everything. Jessica, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And we got more interviews with great executives and some of your favorite athletes still to come here on Radio Row with Front Office Sports.